superpowers as big or great as the United States.
Right.
So what do you think is going to happen in 2020 or in the years afterwards? Because China seems to have problems maintaining their empire. And George Soros a couple of weeks ago said, if we don't basically include them in a world government, they're going to move closer to Russia, and they need a war to keep their empire going. Now, the same argument we hear about the United States, they need a big enough war to keep that empire going. So where do you think this is going to happen? This is going to go?
Boy, that's a huge one. I don't have a crystal ball answer for you there. I wouldn't even pretend to. It's part and parcel of the system, though. When you have a debt-based money system, the only way to keep the wheel turning is to have large-scale industrial enterprises and initiatives. And the one thing that is always indispensably valuable is war. War is now a huge industry. All the technology and surveillance that goes into it, billions of dollars. All the weaponry, billions of dollars. Flying drones, billions of dollars. Pretty soon, artificial intelligence, robot soldiers, billions of dollars to be made. War is big business. And with the monetary system we have, it's going to continue that way, and I can't explain all that. That's beyond the scope of this. We would need a documentary, but if we disarm the Federal Reserve and the central banks and create a new monetary system designed for freedom and liberty, it would disarm the militarist system. It would disarm the interventionism and the war system, simply put, without getting into the details of how that would happen.
No, up until like 2 years, the European Union, which is a Bilderberg project, they were happily selling military goods to Russia. For example, these two major French warships for $1.5 billion. The German Rheinmetall defense company, they sold a whole training center to the Russians, like the most modern thing you can imagine. So, and then came the Ukraine conflict. All of this stopped. Now, is there a chance that the East and the West are still friends? They just need this staged conflict to wipe out opposition at home?
I have often speculated myself that while I don't think Vladimir Putin is Vlad the Impaler, you still cannot totally say that he's an angel. I've speculated that the battle over Ukraine and the West and NATO pushing east and Putin pushing back and trying to make friends with China could be another false dialectic, another East-West playoff. Putin in some instances is portrayed as a nationalist and populist, and I think he's marginally a better man than Obama. That's not saying much, and I think Russia is less warlike than America. However, there still could be something behind under the floorboards there, if you don't mind the metaphor, where there could be another East-West dialectic that could be kind of a false left and right or false alternatives kind of situation. We really don't know. That's just it. You can't totally trust anybody that's involved in this, but yeah, you're naming a lot of good dynamics, and these companies, no matter what their nation, no matter what nation they're from, they trade in war material and war technology and training facilities, like you say, regardless of what the people back home in their home countries might think, regardless of their governments. And that's the danger of Bilderberg, is this corporate networking that just seems to step outside the normal channels. I kind of use a funny metaphor. Remember the Get Smart comedy show? They have the Dome of Silence, right? Well, they have the G7 and they go talk publicly and officially, and then they got their Dome of Silence and they go off the grid into silent mode in Bilderberg, and it's almost like Get Smart and the Dome of Silence. So that's where the real wheeling and dealing takes place. The G7 is just sort of a whatever, And so in that wheeling and dealing under this Dome of Silence, that humorous metaphor, I think that's what you're having. You're having this multi-billion-dollar profiteering that just is regardless of what is in the national interest of any given nation. And so they're always set up for war, even though the people don't want it.
Now, a lot of these current Bilderberg members, they're pretty old. I think even though Queen Beatrix, she officially handed over the reign to her son, but she attends Bilderberg, not him. So is there a generational problem with these elites, and do you think that kind of technology has moved so fast that maybe these older generations ruling Bilderberg, they cannot really keep up with technology, even though they invite all these super nerds?
Well, I think the super nerds perhaps are indicative of them recognizing that they got to get the technology in there. With Eric Schmidt of Google, who we photographed arriving at the airport, with God, I don't have the names right in front of me, but the Peter Thiel, who founded PayPal, and Mr. Karp, Alex Karp, is it?
Yes. He started in Frankfurt and he built this Palantir technology company.
Thank you. And they're involved, I'm told, by like Pete Santilli, the noted radio host. They're involved reportedly. I haven't confirmed it yet. Maybe you have. I don't know. They're involved in this artificial intelligence that can go a million different directions, but that could include robot soldiers someday. I mean, if you have drones in the air, why not drones on the ground? Why not drones under the water? Unmanned sub, right? Unmanned submarine would be effectively a drone.
Yeah, but these old Bilderbergers are kind of the top level. They don't understand code. They don't code. They don't get any of this. I mean, how do they make sure there's no backdoor in it for the nerds? Maybe the nerds are going to take over once they have the robots.
Revenge of the nerds, huh?
Yeah.
Well, Bilderberg, as I've determined, operates on two tracks. Long-term things like the Trans-Pacific Partnership, transatlantic trade deals, these big trading blocks that become building blocks of world government. But I think we've come to understand, you and I and others, that they also have short-term deal making. So maybe the older ones are more involved in keeping the organization together, keeping it and keeping the long-term projects going, and then maybe the techies and the nerds, as you say, are more involved in the deal making, the technology that's going to bring more fat, multi-billion-dollar contracts into the mix. And they all invest in these things, so even the older ones are going to make money. I mean, there's a lot of speculation as we get into this part of it in our interview. But
there's been reports of the top level of the Russian Interior Ministry and basically top levels of Russian administration going back to typewriters, actual typewriters, clacking because of security concerns. And according to Newsweek, they did this long report, I think a year ago, on Vladimir Putin and his work routine. And they mentioned that he has no computer on his desk. He has a phone. He has a phone. Classic,
maybe a dial phone
with a coiled cable on it. He has a phone.
That's interesting.
And if you remember the last James Bond movie, what was it called? The last James Bond movie, Skyfall. Exactly. By the way, we have the former MI6 head at Bilderberg. He resigned last October, so he's on the list, but he's not listed as former MI6. He's listed as some consultant guy.
What's his name?
John Soares.
Okay.
He ran MI6 for 5 years until like last October.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. Yeah, I was just the top spy, and now I'm just a baker, and I sell donuts.
Yeah, I'm not allowed to give out secret information, but I'm going to be in consulting, right?
Right.
But and my point is, so in the last James Bond movie, there was this theme about technology ruining everything for MI6, and there was this big hacker who masterminds everything, and then James Bond goes back to his old Aston Martin DB5, this vintage car. No cell phones, no technology, no satellite, no nothing. Going to the remote place and trying to duke it out with the bad guys. So, even with this NSA thing coming out and the secret information coming out, do you think this is kind of leaking on purpose or letting it happen, or do you think they can't manage their information anymore?
But I got to admit, you're getting into things that I would be very speculative about. Those are the hardest things to know without actually going back and looking into that more based on what you're suggesting. I don't think they can fully contain it. Just looking at it from a logic point of view.
There's been reports of Chinese stealing terabytes of data on the B-2 bomber and the F-35 strike fighter.
Yeah, Chinese espionage is well documented. That's true. That is a fact. That's not speculation. It's just a question of to what extent. But yeah, cybersecurity being one of the topics here. No doubt they're looking at that. The head of, forgive me if I'm wrong, Dutch intelligence is here, I guess.
Yes.
And then I'll just say a few things about what we've written in AFP lately, just to kind of wind up. We've been looking at some of their tax returns of the American Friends for Bilderberg, and that largely consists of names of people that are on the Bilderberg steering committee, including Klaus Kleinfeld of Alcoa, which deals in metals, which would apply to aircraft and military contracts. But right now, just for a current topic, the business roundtable that Klaus Kleinfeld is a major part of Klaus is also working as a physician, which is major Bilderberg connection, and he's on the Bilderberg steering committee. Right now, as we speak, they've been bending the arms of members of the U.S. House to pass the fast track for Obama, so they can pass the transatlantic and trans-Pacific trade deals. That's just some current news where Bilderberg is very connected through Klaus Kleinfeld and Robert Rubin of the CFR, and interestingly enough, that other major Bilderberg conduit, the CFR, the Council on Foreign Relations, they recently vetted Marco Rubio, who came and spoke to him, Lindsey Graham, another presidential candidate, and that priestess of principle, Hillary Clinton. So the CFR has vetted 3 candidates, and the CFR and Bilderberg are like, Bud and Bud Light. They're very, very close. And so they're looking at the candidates. USA elections is one of their topics this year, and they're very concerned about Greece leaving the Eurozone. They're concerned about Brexit, Britain leaving the EU. As you mentioned earlier, building a European Union was a major project, kind of their main reason for starting. They're still trying to hold all that together, even as they pursue these other deals and things that we've talked about today. But that gives you a little bit of a picture of what's currently on their minds.
What do you think about the presidential election coming up? Who do you think is going to be in the top 3, top 4? I think there was speculation about Jeb Bush maybe coming here, and he speaks Spanish. He can get maybe the Spanish vote, and he can reach out. And I think a few other, especially Republican candidates, they're like George Bush, who doesn't speak a foreign language. Some of these candidates, they speak fluent Spanish. They've lived in Spanish-speaking countries. Will we see kind of more of a hawkish president, or maybe we will see Hillary, and she can be quite hawkish and she can sell it well too.
Yeah, Hillary, that's literally a terrifying prospect. But again, you get into some speculation. If you follow the beat of the U.S. media, they've already begun to declare people like Jeb Bush tier 1 or top tier candidate. Now that is purely an artificial invention of the U.S. major media, some of the world media. Before they even know what's going on, way early, they'll start saying who a top tier candidate is without any basis to say that so-and-so is top tier or not. It's based on nothing, literally nothing. It means nothing. And they just try to stack the deck and try and sway the election by simply saying he's top tier, based on polls that are flimsy, that are ill-conceived, and that you can't trust, all these polling. Now, Jeb Bush, as you mentioned, was just in Germany, and then he's supposed to announce Monday, right after Bilderberg's over, whether he's an official Republican candidate. The timing is curious, but no one that I know of has been able to establish whether he came over the border here to Austria, but boy, the timing was sure something. He planned this trip back in April. So Jeb is the one. Hillary is supposedly back in New York right now, in Manhattan today.
But she sent her campaign guy to Bilderberg. I think one of her close affiliates is here.
Yeah, some Twitter guy or some promotion guy.
I don't know. Somebody from her campaign that's with her.
Yeah, that's very notable. So, I mean, if you listen to the U.S. media, it's going to be a hawkish Hillary, a hawkish Jeb. Marco Rubio told the Conservative Political Action Conference last year in D.C. in 2014. Pure interventionism, pure war hawk speeches. Rand Paul's already being marginalized, even though Rand is not quite like Ron. There's some things to look at there. But putting that aside, if you listen to the U.S. media, that's who you're looking at. Marco, and even possibly the South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham, who is even more of a war hawk than the other 3, which is hard to conceive, but it's true. I mean, we've got to bomb Iran before Iran bombs Israel or anyone else, and Iran can't be trusted in any way, shape, or form, and that Putin and the Ukraine, needs to be armed, and the most hawkish perhaps I've ever seen. And these are the people the CFR is vetting, is the war hawk interventionists. So that gives you some idea.
About the European-U.S. relationship. Up until 2 years ago, there's been a lot of talk in Europe and Russia about a possible, in the future, a possible free trade zone. Now that is off the table, while we see this transatlantic partnership getting a lot of steam. So is this kind of the building of the blocks, maybe the East and the West, basically again? So growing together and dividing that world.
Yeah, well, the beginning of Bilderberg was about not just an EU, but about an Atlantic Union, and they meant the United States. Ultimately, they meant the United States right from the beginning. And then there's a transatlantic consumer dialogue, there's a transatlantic trade and investment partnership, TTIP. There's an EU-US delegation to the US where the EU began to send lobbying delegations to U.S. cities, U.S. states. They've spoken to all 50 governors. So they've schmoozed and arm-twisted and wined and dined American officials right down to the municipal and city level, as well as county and state. So the EU, and I'm not saying every European is a bad person or an underhanded usurper or anything, but they are very intent from the bottom up on getting the U.S. and the EU into a cultural, economic, and political union that would be that Atlantic bloc to supplement the Pacific Union, which is where the Trans-Pacific Partnership would be. And these would be, as Jim Tucker said, these would be the building blocks of the world state that Bilderbergers and others in their network are pursuing. So it's very real, very concrete, and the European coal and steel community, an early element in European unification, the office of that, their initial U.S. office in the 1950s and this EU delegation to the U.S. are like right in the same area of D.C. Now that doesn't prove everything, but they're following the same lobbying protocol that they were doing way back in the 1950s.
Same neighborhood.
Yeah, the European coal and steel community would lobby U.S. officials just like the EU delegation to the U.S. is doing now, and that all that has Bilderberg's handprints and footprints all over it. So, the networking and the process stays essentially the same.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Anderson. American Free Press.
Thanks. I've been standing in one place.
Thanks a lot. It was just amazing. Danke, Alexander Benisch.
Rain all day. This morning they said rain all day. That's why I came dressed like this.
Now you edit that down, obviously.